Hey guys, Prowl1701 here, and today we're going to be doing a Patreon request. One of my new patrons, Colin, actually wanted to know what villain or monster do you most associate with each classic Doctor? So looking at the 7 Doctors from the classic series, which villain or monster do I associate with each one? With the caveat that I couldn't reuse a villain or monster. So I'd say I could only have one Doctor I picked to associate with the Daleks, for example. I couldn't use it again. And I like that because I wouldn't have thought to have done that video. I love stuff like that. You know, something where I'm like, I wouldn't have thought of that. That's a really good idea. Especially with the caveat in mind, I really had to actually think about it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the first 7 Doctors. My sinuses are acting up. My sinuses can be fine all day. I turn on the camera, sinuses act up. And we're going to talk about each Doctor and the villain or monster that just kind of pops into my head immediately when I think about that Doctor. And right off the bat, the first Doctor is the Daleks. The Daleks are in 4 stories with the first Doctor? I mean, you have the Daleks, the Dalek Invasion of Earth, the Chase, and Daleks Master Plan. You do have that first iconic story with the Daleks, it does tend to plod. But while I think Unearthly Child might not be the story that got audiences hooked on Doctor Who, if it didn't, I think the Daleks did. I mean, most of us aware about how Dalek Mania hit when the Daleks came out. It's probably one of the reasons why the show took off. So I associate the first Doctor with the Daleks a lot. Plus, now that I've seen it and Dalek Invasion of Earth, and I enjoyed Dalek Invasion of Earth considerably. I still need to watch The Chase. I own The Chase, I just haven't had a chance to watch it yet. And of course, Dalek's Master Plan is just, an epic 12-part story as well. So I associate the Daleks really with the first Doctor there. If I'm thinking of kind of the first main villain I think of, a monster I think of, when I think of the first Doctor, I think of the Daleks. Now for the second Doctor, it's the Cybermen. I think most people would agree that the second Doctor's main villain is the Cybermen. Now, of course, Troughton fought the Daleks. The second Doctor fought the Daleks a couple times his first season. But then, as we know, Terry Nation kind of wanted to do his own things with them, which didn't pan out. And so the Doctor ended up facing the Cybermen several times, fighting them 4 times in the Moon Base, the Invasion, Tomb of the Cybermen, and the Wheel in Space. And 4 times in 3 seasons, I do think that ranks, kind of as his monster. I think most people would probably agree to me that, the Cybermen are kind of his main enemy that's associated with him. And I've seen 3 of those stories, and all 3 of them are good. The only one I haven't seen is Wheel in Space, since 2/3 of it's missing. I've never seen it or recons of it or read the book of it. I have seen that 10-minute animation of it that was included on Macroterra, but that's about it. Although I've heard Wheel does plot a little bit. But I'm rewatching Tomb of the Cybermen right now. One of my subscribers, Ian, sent me the special edition of it, and I'm enjoying that. And of course, I love the Invasion, and I love the Moon Base. But yeah, easily the Cybermen, hands down. If there is a Doctor I associate with the Cybermen, it's the second Doctor. Now, the third Doctor, most people would probably expect me to say the Master. And I could see people choosing that. Usually if I think of the Master pairing with a Doctor, it would probably be the third Doctor. But the Master's interacted with so many Doctors, I wanted something more definitive. And honestly, when I first got to the third Doctor, the first thing that popped in my mind was the Autons. I associate the Autons with the third Doctor. I mean, I associate them with the 9th Doctor as well because of Rose, but I really associate them with the third Doctor, with Spearhead from Space, his first story, which is held in such high regard, and Terror of the Autons, which also introduced the Master. But for me, more so than the Master, I think of the Autons. So if there's one enemy that I would pick that's kind of the third Doctor's enemy that just immediately leaps in my head, it is the Autons. With the Master and the Autons being about a tie, but since I want to use the Master later in the list, I'm going to use the Autons here. Tom Baker's was a lot harder. He doesn't really have a lot that leap out at me. I mean, you could say the Black Guardian, but you could also say that about the Fifth Doctor, the Black Guardian. Probably even more so the Fifth Doctor, the Black Guardian. But the one that really leapt in my head, my acid reflux is acting up, was the Crinoids from the Seeds of Doom. Sutekh I thought about some too, of course. But I haven't watched Pyramid in so many years. It's the only season 13 story I don't own. I love Pyramids of Mars. But the Crinoids, I love them. I love the Seeds of Doom. It's such a good story. I mean, if it wasn't for Talons, Seeds would easily be Tom Baker's best season finale, because Talons is so good as well. But the Crinoids, I love the concept of them and what they are. I mean, that whole story, the first half of Seeds of Doom is basically Doctor Who does the thing before the thing. Before the 82 version of the thing, I should say. The more famous version of it. And I like that. I like the idea of plant life, that instead of, animal life devouring plant life, the plant life devours the animal life. I love that. I love the design of the creature when it's only half transformed like the first one is. That looks creepy. I know it's a repaint of the Axon design, but I saw Seeds of Doom first, so I always think of the Axon design as a repaint of the Crinoid design, even though I know that's not right. It's fully grown. Realization's not as good. But again, I just love the concept of the characters. The Fourth Doctor is really hard because he had so many enemies. I mean, you could have went with Scaroth. You could have went with the villain from Shada. There's so many you could do with Tom Baker. Matter of fact, I'll circle back to Tom Baker because there's one other thing you could have said that I use for another Doctor I'll circle back to. But if I had to pick one just off the top of my head, the first one that really leapt in my head was the Crinoids. Seeds of Doom is really good. Now, the Fifth Doctor for me is Anthony Ainley's Master. Now, I know Anthony Ainley's Master interacted with several Doctors, but for some reason, he always clicks in my head with the Fifth Doctor the most. Maybe because he did so many stories with the Fifth Doctor, and I just felt like his Master is good opposite of the Fifth Doctor. Now, there are others I could have went with. Again, the Black Guardian. I could have went with the Tractators. But for me, the Master, I would say Anthony Ainley's Master is probably the first villain I think of when I think of Davison's Doctor. They just met so many times. And they have several good stories together, and I think his Master and Davison's Doctor just pair off each other really well. The Sixth Doctor, I'm actually going to say the Time Lords, especially because of Trial of a Time Lord. When I think of a main antagonist, if you don't want to say villain or monster, then antagonist for the Doctor, I would definitely say, because I can't use the Daleks and I can't use the Cybermen, so that knocks out part of 22 right there. I think the Time Lords are a good choice. You could use the Time Lords with a few other Doctors as well, but the whole Trial of a Time Lord thing really does have him going up against the Time Lords. I guess I could also say the Valiard. I could say the Valiard, who I guess is also sort of a Time Lord, since he's kind of a future distillation of the Doctor. But I'm going to say just the Time Lords in general, all because of, the whole Trial of a Time Lord season revolves around him butting heads with the Time Lords, basically, all the way up to the end when you find out it's just really him and the Valiard going up against each other. So yeah. And then, oddly enough, the Seventh Doctor is an interesting one. For the Seventh Doctor, I'm going to say humanoid people. Because in a lot of Sylvester McCoy's story, he's going up against human-looking aliens or humans a lot of times. I can't use the Daleks or the Cybermen. I've used them already. A lot of times he's fighting other humanoid things. Can't use the Master, even though I love him in Survival. But, you look at Paradise Towers, a lot of times it's humans he's up against. He is up against the Architect, who used to be a human. And that's kind of its own thing, but he's still having to deal with humans there. Time and the Ronnie, well, I guess he's dealing with the Ronnie. Delta and the Bannerman, the main bad guy, is human-looking. Dragonfire, Kane's mostly human-looking. And again, I can't use Remembrance, can't use Silver Nimbus. Happiness Patrol, human-looking. Greatest Show. Well, I guess the gods aren't human-looking, but sometimes they're human-looking. So I'm going to say the Seventh Doctor, I usually think of him as going up against people. Light in Ghost Light's basically like if a human being was a light bulb. And then in Battlefield, he's going up against Morgaine and her knights. So and even in Curse of Fenric, he's going up against the Fenric creature, but most of the time it's possessing humans. So usually when I think of McCoy going up against a villain, he's going up against something that looks like a human being one way or another. So I think of him, his enemies, his antagonists and villains as people. Humanoid-looking people. Humans or people who look human. Maybe that's a cop-out, I don't know, but that's what I think of when I was thinking about McCoy. He's usually up against regular-looking people or possessed regular-looking people or something along those lines. To me personally, anyway. So that's been me kind of talking about the villains, monsters, and antagonists I associate with each classic Doctor. I'd like to know what you think of my list and which ones you would pick for each classic Doctor. So comment down below and let me know. I want to thank Colin for the Patreon request. I do think it was a really good one that I wouldn't have thought of, so I really enjoyed him coming up with that one. If you would like to become one of my patrons, there is a link to my Patreon down in the description below. My intro level tier is only $2 a month. Anyone that joins at any tier level gets a free video request. I also have a P.O. box if you would like to send me anything. I also have a link to my Amazon wish list down there as well, which I update regularly. And if you haven't hit that like button and that subscribe button yet, go ahead and hit those. Those are free. That helps me out. I appreciate that. Most importantly, though, thank you for watching.